Welcome to Mastermind. Today we are joined by Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan, one of India's most experienced and well-rounded chess professionals. Priyadarshan has built a strong career through years of competitive play, deep theoretical preparation, and a distinctive practical style that has earned him respect across the chess community. He is also contributed significantly as a coach and educator, helping shape the next generation of players. Hey Priyadarshan, welcome to Inside the Mastermind series. It's a pleasure having you here.
Hello, Swapnal. Thanks for having me. Great to be interacting with you and your audience today. Yeah.
That's nice. What's the purpose of choosing this memorable game of yours?
So today the game that I want to show, I have a lot of memorable games, but this particular one I wanted to show is because this was the game which I won to make my final third GM norm and also cross the 2500 rating. So this was the game which eventually where I became a grandmaster, and mainly the psychology aspect of it is what makes me like very much like this game, because there was so much pressure in playing this game, and I did know that if I win this round I was making my third GM norm, and that's the major reason of this game. And in this game basically I am playing white and my opponent is Vera Gonzalez Covado Ronaldo. He's a grandmaster from Cuba. And I was rated 2484 and he was rated 2432. So even though I was an IM, he's a grandmaster. I was the higher rated player here. And this game was played in Philadelphia International in US in the year 2016. And I have played against this particular opponent. I think one time before this game in another tournament a year or two before 2016, and I lost that game. So that was also kind of in the back of my mind when I was going into this round. So that's kind of the highlights, and I felt it's a very interesting game with some concepts that I can explain in detail when we go through the game. Yeah.
Perfect. So before we start in, I would like to share with the audience that Priyadarshan's run this cool venture Chess Gaja, where he does this live classes with the chess players, and I would like Priyadarshan to share some insights on that.
Sure. So Chessaga Private Limited is basically an online chess academy, and whom we focus on is basically we focus on performance-driven, students who are looking for premium chess lessons, and that's basically our core of what Chess Gaja, what we do. We have one-on-one group classes, camps, basically different forms in which students can get better at chess, all the way from absolute beginners, and we also work with players all the way up to like 2300 federated at this point in time. And we have about a team of 35 coaches right now, and we cover currently we have students in 42 countries across the world, basically in every continent except Antarctica we have students kind of. And uh, what we've done with Chess Gaja is, as I said, like mainly classes, and we started this. I started this at 2019, and this became registered private limited organization by 2021. And you know, our major goal is to give, as I said, like professional classes, for like players, and a lot of tech driven in terms of how the lessons are delivered, how we track students' results, all of it. And that's basically about Chess Gaja. We currently have around 200 active learners currently learning from, as I said, a team of around 40 coaches. And I also take classes. And also, as I said, we have classes of all rated level coaches taking classes for all levels of chess players, basically. And we were I think one of the first academies that is from India to start offering adult classes. Now a lot of I think organizations offer adult classes, but we were, I think, we're one of the first ones to offer adult classes, and a significant amount of our students are adult learners who are learning for hobby or coming back to the game after a long period of time, and so on. So, if anyone wants to check out our website, they can. And I am, I'm having one of my group class after a long time. I mainly work on one-on-one, but I'm launched a group class program starting from January 2026. So this is mainly for players who are targeted around 1500 FIDE rating and so on. So if they go to the Chess Gajas group class page, they can see more details and see how they can enroll for it. As in total, it's only a 15 slot group class. It's a limited number of students that only we are allowing into the program. Yeah.
That sounds interesting. I will link those in description. Those who are interested, please check it out. Priyadarshan, let's dive deep in this game.
So I was going to show my game with Grandmaster Vera Gonzalez, and I started e4.
Mhm.
And the point is, I'm basically an e4 player, even though I've tried e4, knight f3, c4, all the different possibilities. And my opponent responded with c5. I was expecting him to play c5 actually.
Mhm.
Knight f3, d6, and bishop d5 check. Uh, d4 is also another line, the open Sicilian I've played quite a bit, but I chose bishop b5 because it's quite solid, and I wanted to wait and see, when I get my chances in the middle game and go with that. So my opponent went bishop d7, the most popular response for the bishop b5 check. And here I played c4. So c4 is like a sideline,
Mhm.
not as popular as bishop takes d7, which is the main line by white. And then generally the game would go like queen takes d7, white would castle or play c4 or c3. These are like the major moves for white in this position. And white would just try to control the center. It's a fairly balanced opening. Black has a lot of variations where black can equalize or neutralize white's pressure. So the idea of c4 is, if black decides to play bishop takes b5, c takes b5, then white's pawn on b5 takes care of these two squares, so that it's very tough for the knight to develop. And white would go knight c3, d4, and try to keep a lot of the pressure on the center to queen side and keep the game going. So my opponent decided not to take on b5. Instead, he went knight c6. I played knight c3 and knight e5. So this is a dubious move by my opponent, and it was very obvious to me that it's dubious during the game because one, I was not prepared for this, and I knew all the lines fairly well. So if this is outside my theoretical scope, I was sure it's definitely not something right. Another thing about it is that it clearly violates or breaks a lot of opening principles because black is moving the same knight twice by move 5, and it's not also helping him to develop any piece or anything of that sort. So I decided, okay, it's time for me to take the initiative and not play some, quiet move like castle or something like that, but try to go for the initiative right from the start here. So I went for d4, opening up the position. And also, in a way, this is the drawback of knight e5. The knight on c6 was having some control on d4 square, but by moving the knight, black has lost control on d4. So
Okay.
knight takes f3, g takes f3, and black played c takes d4, queen takes d4. And here, I was fairly confident. I have a very good plus equals at least in the game. And my logic was that as white, I have three pieces developed, the queen on d4, bishop on b5, knight on c3. Black has only the bishop on d7 developed, so I have a lead in development there. And it's going to be very tough for black to develop this f8 bishop. It's going to take him at least 3-4 moves to develop that. And by then, white's lead in development would further accelerate and so on. And another very important thing to note is like the control on center. Like, the pawns are just extremely like strong. They're controlling d5, f5, queen is on d4. So strong center control in combined with lead in development. So I was very happy with the outcome I got out of the opening up to this point. So my opponent went knight f6, bishop g5, bishop takes b5, and c takes b5. So This is a critical kind of, I think, moment where from the opening stage the game starting to go into the middle game stage. At least from white's perspective, black is still stuck, unable to develop his bishop and the rooks, everything in the process. And one thing I would like could ask the audience here, how they feel about this, like, two doubled pawns that's out here, like for
Yeah.
white. Because double pawns is generally considered not so good and so on. But right out of the opening, white has two sets of doubled pawns here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, you also had the option to take on f3 with the queen, and here also you had the option to take the bishop with the knight, and you
Yes.
still choose on both the moments, to make the double pawns.
Yeah.
Uh, I understand that you're trying for open files for your rooks, but like, how do you decide while in the game? Like, okay, at this moment, double pawns are fine. How do you get to that thought process?
So doubled pawns in itself is not bad, is the philosophy here. So the logic is, let's say you have a doubled pawn and it is very weak and the opponent can attack it. Yes, it's a problem. So the way I generally explain it, like when I teach it to my students and all about doubled pawns and all the logic is, um, imagine like imagine it like, let's imagine you're a bird, and the primary strength you have is flying. So in this scenario, you cannot go and join a running race because your strength is flying, not walking or running. But if you join a running race, yes, it's a weakness. But if you are joining, let's imagine, a flying race, you don't have a problem here. So if you're competing with other birds, it's not a problem. If you're competing with animals that can run, it's kind of a problem, because the animals will take advantage of your weakness, which is that you cannot run, so you will lose the race, kind of logic.
Mm-hmm.
So here in this scenario, by going gf3 as well as cb5, one cb5, the pawn on b5 is very well protected by my knight on c3, whereas the pawn on f3, it's impossible to kind of come and attack. Only two ways I can really see: if the queen lands on h3, some queen d7, queen h3, or if the knight goes knight d7, knight e5. But in both those scenarios, it takes very conscious effort by black to go and go after the pawn. But that 2 to 3 moves that black would take to go and attack the pawn, I would gain a lot of tempos in the process there. So this kind of this thought process or double pawn itself means it's bad, I think, is something that people should understand. It is not the case. Double pawn certainly has its own set of merits, and one automatic merit when you get a doubled pawn that you can notice is you get an additional open file which your opponent would not. For example, here the g file is an open file for
Mm-hmm.
black white, but black, it's not an open file. So every time you get a doubled pawn, one immediate compensation you generally get is like it becomes an open file, the file that where you capture and open up that file, and so on. So and in the game here, queen f3 is not that actually possible because the
Mm-hmm.
d4 pawn is hanging. So it's kind of like a forced capture to double the pawn here, gf3.
Yeah.
But in this scenario, yes, it's a voluntary capture on to take a double pawn with cb5 instead of knight b5. And I think the logic was, if I decide to go knight b5, I think black would just go a6, kick my knight. My knight has to come back, and then black will play e6, bishop e7, fairly standard game. But when I go with cb5 in this scenario, my knight's still aiming at d5 immediately if it wants to do something over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it's actually my double pawns are a huge strength here instead of weakness. Yeah.
Got it.
So my opponent went with knight d7 here. I think the logic was, I mean, he was not interested in playing something like e g6 maybe, because I could just maybe capture bishop f6, ef6, and long castle, and his pawns are very weak. Or in case if he goes e6 kind of lines here, also I was most likely just planning to do long castle and go rook g1. And one of the problems for my opponent is that he can't like kind of castle that easily because there's always some bishop at 6 kind of ideas. So his king is kind of stuck. King needs to find a good square. So he went knight d7 first. Uh, so once again, his pieces are dropping back, which means I get chances to increase my lead in development, and I long castle. So this is actually a kind of a question maybe I could ask, like why long castle over short castling when both castling options were open, or I could have even kept the king in the center of the board. But I decided to long castle because if I go king b1, the king is still surrounded by two pawns and it's fairly safe. And I have actually a bunch of more pieces, I would say, towards the queen side. So the king would feel secure by the major and minor pieces of white there. So that is why I decided to long castle here.
Okay.
And my opponent played h6, and I dropped back with my bishop, and he played e6. So yeah, so this is the position, and
Be-
maybe I think the audience could think for a few minutes how they could further increase their initiative or lead in development, and what they would plan
Mhm.
to target in black's position and so on here. Yeah.
Yeah, audience can obviously stop the video and figure out what how to develop the pieces. But just before that, one more question. When h6 was played,
Yeah.
you went bishop e3, right?
Yes.
I believe bishop h4 should be also an option. You keep the e pawn pinned, like it can't move. So, like, how do you come to a conclusion? Okay, I don't want my bishop there, and my bishop is doing pretty good on e3.
I think there's one small tactic. If bishop h4, black
Hmm.
can go e5 here,
Hmm.
and the queen and bishop is under attack. If I take here, they'll play ed4, and the bishop as well as knight is hanging. I cannot defend both at the same time. So, but in this scenario, if black had tried, let's say, okay, so instead of h6, then why didn't black try e5 directly?
Hmm.
Here I can just drop back my queen to d2 or e3 and
Okay.
defend the bishop. So this tactic doesn't work when if black plays e5 directly, and e5 is a very committal move because then d5 is a permanent weakness that my knight can easily jump into here,
Hmm.
and so on.
So it
So
was just a tactical reason, right?
yeah, it's and also I felt the bishop could actually do a good work from maybe coming to d4 in the future, from e3 to d4 in
Hmm.
the long run, because this is obviously the center, so it kind of controls both the d4 a7 and d4 g7 diagonal and so on. Because we go bishop h4, and if for any reason black does go g5 and I'm forced to play bishop g3, let's say if my bishop is here, I
Hmm.
don't feel there's much I could do in this diagonal with my
Okay.
bishop. But if I'm on bishop e3, let's imagine if black decides to short castle, I will also have some bishop takes h6 sacrifice ideas and so on.
Got it.
So tactics is the immediate reason, but purely if you look from a logic also, I think the bishop on e3 is much better in long-term potential than on h4.
Perfect. Got you.
So for bishop e3, my opponent played e6. And as I was saying, what is like the context of this game? I'm basically playing for a win because if I win, I get my GM norm, a final GM norm, and the title. So I wanted to take risk, but at the same time, I didn't want it to kind of like not kind of lose control of the game. I wanted to take very calculated decisions throughout this game. So I went with f4. So the idea of f4 is like I could go f5, provoke e5, and get control on d5 square. Or if the situation demands, I could go e5, ask or like kind of make black to play something like d5, and then I go f5 and literally open up the center. So the major point to note here is as black's king is still in the center, whereas white has castled,
Mhm.
I would like to open the files or diagonals near the king so that I can use my lead in development and attack the king. So f4 helps with that. So for example, a chess kind of a tip or a general logic is that if you want to open files and diagonals, obviously one of the best ways to try to look for pawn breaks to open it up. So by playing f4 f5 or f4 e5 f5, you're trying to open up the d file or the e file or the f file in the process, and so on. So I played f4, and the only piece I'm yet to develop is the rook on h1. But I did have a dilemma whether the rook would go to e1 or g1.
Hmm.
So I thought I'll wait for that rook. I would not make a commitment with that rook yet, but I'll just focus on my other pieces and development and so on. So I played f4, and my opponent played a6. So I went king b1, and my opponent went queen a5 here. So black's threatening to capture on b5,
Yeah.
and I think this is a moment where audience could take maybe 2-3 minutes to kind of make their plan further from here, because black is showing very early signs of some sort of activity. Up to this point, black did not show any active or trying for active ideas, but now some threats they are trying to target on the a file, some pressure on b5, on all of it. So if you're playing white, what would you play? You could pause the video and think about it here.
Cool.
Yeah. So in the game, I made a decision here which was slightly dubious, and I realized it like after my opponent replied to it. I immediately realized why I found it slightly dubious, and there was obviously a much better move than what I played on the game. So I played b takes a6, and my logic during the game was, okay, my opponent would play rook takes a6 or queen takes a6, and I have my a2 very strongly defended. I don't have to worry about it, so I can just focus on developing my rook, trying to open up the center, do all those kind of things. That is what was my logic behind b takes a6. But I did not expect or did not calculate at all that he could take with b takes a6. I think the reason why I did not anticipate this capture is because queen a5 as well as the rook being on a8, it makes sense that they try to create attack on the a file. So I was like, why would they kind of play ba6 and kill their own attack? I think that is why my mind did not register that b takes a6 as a candidate move for black. But when black played b takes a6, I immediately realized that, okay, now black's going to go rook b8, and black's going to put pressure on the b file as well as on the a file. So I realized, okay, that is why b takes a6 is slightly dubious for white. What instead, as white, I should have done here is I should have just gone queen c4.
Queen
If I had
c4.
gone queen c4, I'm defending the b5 pawn. And another good thing of queen c4 is I'm also aiming at this diagonal over here, and f5 is going to be a dangerous threat, and
Yeah.
the pawn's going to be under pressure. They have to make a decision e5 or ef5, and whatever they make, as my queen is on c4, it's like a multi-purpose queen defending here as well, but also here. So basically it frees up my knight from the defensive role of defending a2. My knight can consider starting ideas of knight d5 and so on, if the e6 pawn moves away. So this is kind of a much stronger way to play this position.
Hmm.
And possibly the game might have continued like bishop e7, rook g1, castle, and f5.
Hmm.
And so now I have pressure on this diagonal, this file. The king is much weaker for black compared to white's king here, and
Yeah.
so on. So for queen a5, I played b a6, and my opponent played b takes a6.
So
So
just a
immediate,
question before we move ahead.
yeah,
Like, sh- this happens with everyone, right? You
yeah,
make a mistake or a blunder,
yeah,
and sometimes even at the moment you make the move and press the clock, you realize you made a blunder, or as happened with you, the opponent just played the move and you realize why it's a mistake, right?
yeah,
So how do you come back with that? Like, for example, if I played that and now you know, right, queen c4 is a good move. Now I
yeah.
will have been thinking, oh no, I should have played queen c4. What should I do? So how do chess players should come out of this and focus on the game? after that?
So that's kind of part of being a serious chess player. It is that you can't play a perfect game, and you have to kind of accept or train your mindset to be like, okay, I am going to make mistakes during the game. I'm not a perfect player. I'm not a computer engine to play 100% the most accurate moves every time. And if it here the mistake was not like where I completely lost all my advantage, not that kind of a mistake. I lost some of my advantage, but still it's favorable for white. But there are obviously times where you just blunder, or you just you get to a really bad position by just playing one move and so on. So in those scenarios, the only thing is like, okay, you just have to forget it immediately. It is tough, no doubt about it. It's not like it's not a joke when you throw away an advantage completely or something like that. But you have to recover immediately during the game and have to see like, okay, what is still like, what are the advantages I still have, what are still the strengths I have in the position, for what can I play for, right? Because you have basically kind of, let's say, thrown away one of your major strengths in a position, but what is still remaining? What can I target in opponent's point? What are the weaknesses? What is still some of the strengths I still hold on to, which I can kind of maneuver or use it, leverage and use it to the best of my ability, kind of thing. That's like the only approach we should do. If we kind of dwell it during the game, it's not going to help. So one kind of a theory or a thing that I explain a lot as well, similar to this, is, let's say during a tennis game, a player cannot, let's say they played a very bad shot and they lost a point. They have to keep going. They cannot like dwell back and just try to analyze the game like real time,
Hmm.
right? Like you have to move on and play for the next point in the tennis match. But only in chess, like I mean, I say this in generally in the context of, let's say, um, during the tournament, do you analyze? Should you analyze your own games, or should you wait for the whole tournament to go like over and then you analyze? Because in tennis matches, like there's no instant like for a player to replay during the game itself and analyze. Maybe he or she might get some inputs from coaches, maybe in real time, but the logic is you have to be in the moment. You have to kind of respond to what the current scenario is. So if you are looking to become a stronger chess player, you have to build that mindset. Okay, I have messed up, but what is still remaining? Can I play for something still in that situation? And I want to still put up a good fight and things like that. Yeah.
Sure. That
So
sounds pretty deep.
yeah. So B takes A6, my opponent played. So as I kind of uh, a bit freaked out when my opponent played B takes A6, I was like, okay, now he's going to get a lot of counterplay possibly in the B file. So what I said is like, okay, maybe I slightly lost control of the position, so let me strengthen the control again. So I played Rook D2, purely prophylaxis. Even before the rook is going to come to b8 and hit my king or the b2 pawn, I'm saying like I'm ready if you're going to hit or try any sort of attack.
Hmm.
So pure prophylaxis with rook d2. And my opponent went rook b8, and then I went rook g1. So my logic is I have to do something with my h1 rook. It's been idle for 16 moves. And I have a lot of options though. It could go to d1, c1, e1. Maybe d1 or c1 is better choices than e1, but d1, c1, and g1, all three has some logic to it. So I chose g1 because I really wanted to target the g7 pawn, and that was my major thing. And I also calculated something very clearly. So maybe for the audience, they could see what happens if black goes bishop e7, because rook b8, one of the major things is to attack via this diagonal as well, put pressure on this knight. So how can white win if black plays bishop e7 here?
Please stop the video, guys, and figure out the solution and comment down it.
So I hope the viewers have paused and have figured out some of the complications, minor complications, which I anticipated might happen. So if bishop e7, you definitely should not play queen g7. It's a bad idea because bishop f6 and the bishop defends the rook, and also bishop takes c3 or queen takes c3 is going to come, and black's just winning. But the key is you can play rook takes g7. That is also actually another logic behind rook g1. If I don't play rook g1, black, let's assume I just play hypothetically, let's say I just go king a1, something like this. Then my opponent can go bishop e7, and if I take, he'll go bishop f6. And basically, I'm going to lose on, I'm going to get checkmated on the queen side here, and so on. But rook g1, the logic is I'm discouraging bishop e7 because I'm going to play rook takes g7, and if they go bishop f6, it is queen takes d6. And if they decide to capture my rook, it's queen takes d7 check, king f8, queen d6 check, king g8, and I win the rook, and I have a huge material advantage. White's clearly winning here. And in case for rook g7, bishop f6, queen takes d6, if black plays some sort of rook b7 to defend the knight, then I can go here in the situation, queen c6, attacking the rook. And if they play some sort of moves, let's say like bishop takes c3 or something like that, I don't have to really worry much. I can just take the rook on b7 if I want to, and go queen c8 check and initiate a lot of complications which favor white clearly there. And if my opponent retreats back with queen c7, then I have no problem just swapping the queen and pulling back the rook back to g1 like this. And in case for queen c6, if black plays rook c7 kind of lines here, I can go queen a8 check here and win the rook on h8 if they go king e7. So all these complications I figured out, it's very much in white's favor. So that's why I went rook g1, and my opponent played queen b4 here.
Okay.
And I dropped back queen d3. So the reason why I didn't want to exchange queen is because I have a lot of initiative in the position, and I want to keep the initiative. If I exchange, I thought the initiative would get diluted a bit. So I went queen d3. My opponent went knight c5. Bishop takes c5. Queen takes c5, and rook c2. So some knight d5, knight d5 especially with some knight c7 checks are coming up. So my opponent went queen b4, and I picked up the pawn queen a6. So when we reached this position, I had actually had two ideas in my mind. One was queen takes a6, another was to play f5. Both of it was moves that I seriously considered. So f5, the idea was, this was what I actually calculated in the game. Something like if black goes bishop e7, similar logic, rook g7 leads to bishop f6. But my idea was, okay, I can take here, and go queen h3, attacking the e6 pawn. And if black goes some king f7, I could give a check, push the king, try to give another check. And if they go king g8, then I can go queen g4, or if they go bishop f6. So I saw something like this up to here, and I knew I had a good position. Definitely, I'm better than black in terms of king safety, but I just could not really see how there's a knockout punch, or basically how the game gets over, or a very definitive advantage. I knew it's an advantage, but I couldn't see the definitive way to force things here. But later on, when I analyzed, I realized white could go e5 here and go knight e4. And by doing this, I just shut down the bishop completely, and the rooks will enter, and the king is stuck. This is a huge advantage. But when I was playing this in the game, when I compared FA and Queen A6, Queen A6 seemed to be a much more logical choice because, as I said, I'm trying to minimize the risk in this game. I want to get an advantage, but at the same time, I don't want to give a lot of counterplay to my opponent. So Queen A6 seemed like a very logical approach because I grab one of the opponent's pawns. So I have a concrete material advantage, which is a huge psychological kind of a confidence, especially when you're playing for a win. And I thought, okay, I can play it slow. I don't want to rush and convert this. So I played queen a6. My opponent went bishop e7. I picked up the second pawn with rook takes g7, and he went king f8, rook g3, rook g8. So two pawns up, materially just strong advantage. Now it's just matter of technique. And maybe for the audience, in this scenario, when instead of king f8, if he had gone bishop f6, I would have gone rook g3 here, so
Mhm.
that if they capture here, I could give some sort of a queen c6 check first, and then play rook, g c3. So just to
S-
show to the audience, so I would have most likely played something like this here. I could give another check if I want to, and do this as well. Maybe push the king to f8 or something, or e8, and then play like this. And just extremely huge advantage for white. Like white's just dominating the position. So my opponent went king f8 instead of going bishop f6. I went rook g3, rook g8. I dropped back with my queen, mainly to defend the e4 pawn.
mhm.
Bishop f6, e5, bishop g7. So yeah, so here I would like the audience to pause the video and maybe calculate for a minute or two, and see if they can find some interesting ways to win. Like literally anything is kind of a huge advantage here, but there's a very computer style win for white here. If anyone wants to try attempt it, I didn't do that, but definitely that's just something I think for fun people can solve here. If you're playing white, how would you win with the most precise way? Yeah.
Perfect. Let's see. Let's see the precise way and also what you played in the game.
My opponent played bishop g7, and there are two ways I would say. One which I played, which is the safer move. It just consolidates the advantage, or kind of a computer style win here.
Mhm.
So the point here is knight d5 is like that computer style win, because the logic is after e takes d5, you would just go to b3 and you capture the rook on b8.
Mhm.
Or if black says, no, I don't want to capture the knight, I just go back to e5, then white will go knight b4. It's another amazing move. The logic is, okay, queen b4 is kind of like repetition. Again, you just go to b3 when the rook on b8.
Mhm.
If they play rook takes b4, then there is rook c8 check, forcing the king to come to e7, and then you win material on g8 and just big material advantage.
Yeah.
If for knight b4, if I mean, and also the threat is knight c6 is being threatened, so black cannot really do much here, and black's going to be lost. That's with knight d5 as a move
Did
here.
this move even cross your mind in the
No,
game?
not really, because my logic at this moment was I just want to consolidate my advantage and push my pawns and win the game. So I was kind of zoned out of these complications. My focus was, okay, how do I stabilize the position as of now, and then slowly push my extra pawns on the queen side and win.
Was it
So
because like there was so much at stake, or like generally this is your approach?
in this scenario, certainly lot was at stake. That is one. But also, if I had seen the logic, okay, I can win material for sure. There is
Mhm.
definitely no way I would not have played this. I would have gone for it, knight d5.
Mhm.
It's just that knight d5 did not cross my mind at all.
Okay.
My logic was like, as I said, I kind of zoned out on my thought process. I was in this mode like, okay, my goal as of now is to consolidate my advantage this game and then push for the win once I get that stability in it.
Mhm.
But if it was some other game, and if knight d5 had occurred to me as a candidate move, I would have certainly like given some thought into it. Uh, Knight d5 is, even I would say, is actually not that tough of a move if people do think seriously. But knight b4 is kind of very computer risk. I don't think anyone would, a human player would go knight b4 as a move. But it's the best move. But it's just like you're just putting the knight in front of queen and rook to say capture it kind of thing. Maybe
Mhm.
people might more consider moves something like knight f6, but that's just tripled pawns. Maybe not something that's that good for white to get a tripled pawn on the board over there. Because all the three are weaknesses. Then f2, f4, and f6. If we go something like this and take and go some sort of queen f5,
Yeah.
and yeah, like this. So
Got it.
my open, so I went queen e3 here. My opponent went bishop h8. I played rook e2. So my major thing was I just wanted to stabilize or strengthen e5 as much as I want as I can, and then I could do other things. And one thing I was very clear was I didn't want it to open up this diagonal. I wanted this bishop to stay passive and be closed, like locked by the e5 pawn. So my
Yeah.
opponent went rook c8. So I offered a queen trade. He refused. And this is kind of the one good thing when you have a very strong position. So when you try to, let's say, liquidate and try to get your advantage, many a times your opponent would refuse it because it might lead to much worse positions if they exchange. But as part of the refusal of that exchange, what they would generally try to do is they try to go back to their own side, which is basically going back to their own shell where they feel more secure. So within their own camp. But when they are withdrawing and going back, that means an active or a semi-active piece kind of ends passive in the process. So the, kind of an active queen on b4 is now passive on b8, but from there it is very tough to exchange that piece. That's kind of the logic.
Yeah.
Because if you're in your own area, it's very tough for me to go and force that exchange. But I managed to get better center control as white here by doing this. So now I queen d4, he went to d5. So I was extremely happy as d5 happened because now e5, there's not much pressure on the e5 pawn anymore. Rook c2, rook g6, queen d3, and rook takes g3. And here I would ask the audience to pause and think how they would capture on g3. That's three captures: queen, f pawn, h pawn. And what would be the logic why they would choose one over the other. All the three are good moves, but there would be a personal preference. I'm sure everyone would choose one over the other.
Yeah.
What would it be? And in this position, yeah.
I think like just take with the f1 and undouble it, but yeah, you can still take with the h pawn, capture it in the center. I don't know why I'm not liking queen takes rook, because mostly because it's the pawn just stays disconnected.
Yeah,
So
queen
yeah,
g3 is obviously the worst of the three captures. It doesn't connect the pawn chain.
yeah,
So it's majorly it's between h and f. Queen
yeah.
g3 definitely not a major line to consider. So my logic in the game, I played h takes g3. F g3 has a very clear logic. Also, you completely undouble. You only have to defend h2 safe. Then the whole pawn chain is secure and logic. But the reason why I went with h g3 was because in this game or in the scenario, when I saw f g3, I saw some possibilities for some queen a7 or queen b6 with some checks on this g1 diagonal,
Wow.
especially
Hmm.
on the square.
Hmm.
And I was like, if the pawn is on f2, that just stopped. There's no checks on that. And I thought hg3 made a lot more sense from that perspective. Even though it's a doubled pawn, I was okay with that in this scenario. Like I continue to be doubled.
Hmm.
And my opponent went bishop g7 because he wanted to activate the bishop via f8 and all that. So I offered a rook trade. Again, if he refuses to rook trade and goes d8, then he's giving me the open c5. So every time they refuse a trade, your piece is positioned further in. So my opponent said he didn't have much of an option, so he allowed me to exchange the rooks. So I offered a queen trade. Obviously, that would be like resignation, equally exchanging the queens. So he
Hmm.
went queen b8. I played a3,
Hmm.
bishop f8, king a2, king g7. So
Hmm.
in this scenario, I think many players naturally would be tempted to jump to d4 with their
Yeah.
knight, position it on a central square, and then maybe knight c6 or f5, some ideas like that. That would be the natural reaction. But I chose something much slightly different from that. I went knight c1. So I wanted to put the knight on d3. So why I wanted to put the knight on d3 is because the d3 knight is like an all-rounder, does multiple things, defends f2, defends e5,
Hmm.
and so I can play f5 if I want to at some point. And also I wanted to put the knight on a light square because the bishop or the bishop especially cannot attack. If it's on d4, some queen b6, bishop c5 attack will come. But if the knight is on d3, then it's a light square. So only the black queen can attack, but that I can safely defend. So my opponent went queen b6, knight d3. And another core or important thing of knight d3 is I am restricting this bishop still. If not, the bishop cannot come here. The square is still controlled. So the
Mhm.
bishop can come only to e7, but that's like that diagonal has really nothing for black.
Yeah.
So my opponent went queen d4. So now it's time to execute your pawn pushes and get your one of the pawns towards promotion. So
Mhm.
b4, bishop e7, king b3, and black's trying some counterplay if possible. Any h5, a4, h4. I just capture, and this kind of beautifully sums up the knight's role here. It just defends
Yeah.
this pawn, this pawn, and like does every defends all the key pawns that's in the position.
Yeah.
And I played a5, so queen a1. So offered a queen trade. He went back. I played queen c3. He went queen a7. So kind of this constant offering of trade and black refusing to trade is something that's something to learn here. Because
Mhm.
after I go once again, I offer a queen trade. He goes back and I go queen d4. So if you look at it, when we started the queen trade, this was the position,
Yeah.
and about 4 moves later, you end up this position. So basically, I've pushed back the black queen, whereas I've improved my queen a lot.
Yeah.
So my queen has become centralized. My queen's become to a much better square. He went queen b5. So now it's time to play f5, attack the bishop. And he played ef5. The point is obviously I cannot take on h4 immediately because that's queen d3. But the logic is, and the thing is, if he doesn't take, I would most likely play f6 and do some checkmate on the g file, most likely.
Yeah.
So the when my opponent played ef5, I don't have the option to play queen h4 immediately because queen d3 and a lot of checks are there. But the
Mhm.
logic of f5 is that if he doesn't like capture on f5, I was going to play f6 and threaten some checkmate on the g file.
Yeah.
So after e takes f5, I went knight c5. So now I'm going to pick up the d5 pawn or h4 bishop. So he dropped back to e7. I capture on d5, queen f1, queen d4, king
Mhm.
g6. So now I went king a4. So
Okay.
the logic of king a4 is I just wanted the king to be surrounded by the pawns if required, go king b5 in the future and be very safe as I start to prepare a6 on the board.
Yeah.
And my opponent went queen e2. I just played knight d3 to kind of cut off the queen's control on the a6 square. And my opponent went queen a2, king b5, bishop g5, and time to push the a pawn forward a6.
Yeah.
So he went queen e2 because if he goes queen e6, I would most likely force the queen trade with queen d6.
Yeah.
So he went queen e2. I went a7, queen f3, and I went knight c5 here. So basically, the knight is secure. I wanted the knight to be strongly defended so that it's now I'm free to move my queen wherever I want to.
Yeah.
So he went bishop e7 because one of the threat was queen d6 check and queen c6, something like that. So by
Yeah.
playing bishop e7, he wanted to control the d6 square. So as we've seen quite often in this game, I'm offering a queen trade. My opponent has to refuse because it's if not, it's lost right away. So he goes back. I push his queen back, and then I improve my queen, queen d7. So he captured, I captures, he went queen f3, and I played queen c6 check, and he resigned here because the queen trade is going to happen, and I played queens, and it's game over. So that's basically this game, I would say. Yeah,
Yeah, perfect. Like this was a perfect example, like how you play under pressure when there's so much at stake. Really enjoyed your explanations, Priyadarshan. Also, I would like viewers to check out Chess Gaja. Thanks, Priyadarshan, for coming in. Bye, guys.
thanks for having on the today's episode, Swapnil. Happy to have showed one of my good games. Yeah,
Sure. Thanks.
thank you.